People were actually taking mini bags of mini marshmallows in their cars to use as coffee sweetener because they're sweet. If they go stale, it doesn't really matter because I'm dropping them into coffee anyway, and I just need it to dissolve. And it was solving a need for them in ways that, other sweeteners and so forth weren't. Super
Mm.
unexpected, sort of an insight that no one at the brand or frankly on our side either had ever thought to ask about. But it was sitting right there in this information and led to some really interesting product ideas and innovation ideas for that brand. And I've like tons of examples of that kind of stuff where it's just, oh, wouldn't have even thought to ask, but consumers were leaving that trail of signals right to that idea if you could just listen to them.
Welcome to Everyday Innovation, your go-to podcast for enhancing your creative and entrepreneurial process. I'm Jordan DeVeccia, a multi-passionate creator entrepreneur, venture studio co-founder, and business designer and advisor. Here we live at the intersection of creativity, strategy, and personal development. Join me for inspiring conversations, actionable practices, and insight infusions designed to shift your mindset and empower you with tools and resources to create impactful ventures. Get ready to take your ideas to the next level and innovate with purpose. Welcome back to Everyday Innovation. Today I'm speaking with Russell Evans, a partner at global consulting firm ZS. His work centers on helping CPG and other consumer-facing brands turn deep customer understanding into smarter product, brand, and venture decisions. Inside ZS, he's also taken on an entrepreneurial role, experimenting with and creating new AI-driven tools and insight models to help large organizations innovate with more speed and confidence. Russell, welcome.
For having me, such a treat.
Of course. So before we get into how you're actually innovating in this space now, I wanted to give the person listening a little bit of context on what led you here, and just so they can get a little bit more of an understanding of your perspective. So what pulled you into this space and specifically even your role that you play at ZS?
I suppose if you ask my family, it was probably somewhat ordained as my two imaginary friends growing up were named Toyota and Honda, which is probably
Oh my
indicative
gosh.
of the volume of TV I was watching, good parenting decision there, and attraction to commercials at the time.
Oh,
Really energized by helping brands find mutual benefits to serve their customers and their consumers better. And so that kind of win-win between brands and consumers and how to make that happen, easy to say, very hard to do. And that's really what I've spent most of my career doing for the last 2 decades or so, and has motivated a lot of what we're doing now today.
in any of the interviews that I've done, there's always a story, there's a pattern that follows over time, and it's really kind of a love for brands, a love for certain types of products, and it's incredible to kind of see that come full circle into the role that you have now. So tell us a little bit about ZS. It's a global consulting firm, but maybe you can give us a little bit more context on the company itself so we can set up that story of how this brand obsessed guy from a young age came to this firm and now is changing the narrative with some new products.
Yeah. We are, I would say, a large firm that maybe goes under the radar. So there's something like 14,000 of us now across the globe. And the easiest way I tend to describe the work we do is as a data-driven decision-making company. Um, the first project that ZS did 40 something years ago, when the Z and the S, who are two real humans, the founders of the firm, were Kellogg professors, basically used an obscure kind of algorithm to help size a sales force. And so applying data in a very pragmatic situation in ways that typically had not been data driven at that point. That became our first project, and we never really looked back. That is really in our DNA today. Very fact based, data driven, a lot of use of analytics, and these days, as you might imagine, AI to help with the recommendations that we make to our clients. And we've now grown across a lot of different industries. I find myself now working with, as you mentioned before, primarily consumer companies. And a lot of that tends to be how do we deeply understand those consumers at the end of that value chain, the people who are buying and using our things? Who are they? What makes them tick? What do they need to solve problems in their life? Why is the stuff out there doing it, or maybe not? And then what do we do about it? How do we bring better brands into the category? How do we bring products that are relevant that solve those needs? And how do we engage with them? So once we have a thing out there, how do we let them know about it? How do we find that alignment between people out there who have needs and products that could potentially solve those needs?
So, as a brand, let's say, brings you into the process at ZS and you have a lot of these data driven insights, where is kind of the human component of solving kind of that creative process or those creative problems? Maybe you can give me an example of a common issue that brands are finding where they would seek your counsel.
If you were to just walk through the aisle of a grocery store, for example, every one of those products on the shelf has had entire teams of humans involved in getting that thing to be on that shelf. Someone had to conceptualize that there was even an opportunity for that thing. Teams of people had to invent that thing. Brands had to be built. Things had to be produced, shipped to a store. There's just massive amounts of energy and resource that goes into what is seemingly a simple thing, like, oh, here's a
Right.
box of spaghetti or whatever. Um, and so that's a huge endeavor that's wildly expensive and extremely complicated to get right. Brands who do that have been investing in consumer intelligence and human intelligence for years and years. The closer you can get to who that buyer, that shopper, that consumer is, the more effectively you can bring that thing to that shelf.
Right.
And so that's work that ZS has been doing, that I've been doing for many decades. I think the realization in the last few years has been, wow, it's getting harder and harder to really do that at scale. The appetite for that insight about who these people are and what they want keeps getting larger, which is good in a sense. Brands care more and more about being data driven, but it's also getting more expensive and more time consuming to do that at scale. And so that kind of friction is one that we've been playing with. How do we meet the needs of these brands in providing that deep intelligence about these people in ways that are increasingly more efficient, given budgets are slimmer and slimmer everywhere? Everyone's trying to do more with less. And so for us, leveraging AI and these days generative AI and all that it can do has become a really important part of that. So using tools and technology like that to take the humans, the expertise that we have at ZS, to understand
Right.
the humans that our brands, that our clients and their brands care about.
And what have you noticed as far as what has become more difficult about understanding consumers? Is it a mix of how they're interacting with brands on so many different platforms or in different places now? Is the behavior changed? Is it changing more quickly? What are you seeing as one of the bigger issues on maybe collecting the data or getting useful data on that end consumer?
I mean, I guess in some sense, humans have become more complex,
Mm,
or at least the complexity is more evident with technology and the internet. Consumer expectations have increased dramatically at the same time that there's just more competition than ever. And so it's not just that there is one brand in a category. I go to
right.
Target and buy paper towels, and there's just one paper towel there. No, there's 1,000 paper towels there. And each one of those brands are doing the same types of work to try to compete for attention and money at the end of the day from a shopper. And so consumer expectations have increased, but every given brand out there is also facing intense competition. And so the stakes are higher. They're all deploying the same types of tools to try to have that deep understanding to bring better products faster and better and so forth. So it's just gotten a lot more complex.
And then at the same time, there are these technologies that are there to kind of help support in this process, but there is still that nuance of your expertise and those have been who have had the experience over years and years during these shifts to find new ways to capture the right type of data. And I know that was a potential problem in ZS and that it's something that you were addressing on how can we get some new types of data or new ways to look at data so that we can better understand our customers. So I wanted to ask you a little bit kind of more about that dual problem of how can we address innovation utilizing some new technology within ZS and then also help our clients do the same.
The trigger that led to this kind of journey that I've been on for the last few years, we were working at a
Of course.
large global consumer goods company doing what I was describing earlier. So they had a desire to understand all of the different kind of needs that existed in the categories they played in. And we were using the sort of traditional human insight playbook. So a lot of qualitative research to understand and talk to real people, real shoppers, quantitative research to go and put numbers behind these things. What are those needs? How big are they? How fast are they evolving? Which needs are met already and those that are not met? All the types of things that a brand, an organization, a collection of brands like that would want. It just happens that we were doing this across so many categories all at once that we had fielded something like 60,000 interviews as part of this kind of
Wow.
research process. And I think it broke us a little. It was
Mm,
amazing work, high quality work, but the scale of doing this. And then at the end of that, we still found ourselves with questions that we couldn't answer. There just wasn't enough real estate in a piece of quantitative research like that. to answer all the questions that our client had that we had. And so it was really a trigger for us that was even an organization of this size with larger resources than average could
Mhm.
not get to the bottom of all the questions they had through these traditional approaches. There's got to be a better way to do this. And
Right.
um, that led to some exploration on our side. And the inspiration was really from our day-to-day lives, which, yeah, Jordan, maybe I'll ask you, like when you have to go make a purchase, what's the first thing you do?
Well, I think well, it depends. I guess I can be pretty brand loyal, but if I'm looking for something new, I would look to of the brand assets to see if it resonates with something that I would like to use in general. I typically check availability. So if it's something that I would buy in person, I'm going to one of my favorite stores. If it's somewhere online, I might be looking depending on convenience or if it was recommended. I mean, I think that's a huge I wouldn't say necessarily always like influencers for me, but if I have seen friends or other people talk about it online, I think that's usually a big driver for myself as well in, trusting that the new product that this person who seems to have good taste or seems to have, a certain standard in what they're using, I align with that and then I maybe will try it.
Yeah. And we're doing those types of things in our day-to-day lives for purchases. And there's this signal trail, if you will, of data out
Right.
there that gives clues into what you just said. So I'm going to different sources. I'm seeking influencers. I'm going to sources like Reddit and doing research on what other people have been saying. I'm reading product reviews on e-commerce
Yes.
websites. There are so many places out there where people are talking about who they are and why they liked a thing or not, that if you and I are making $100 purchase, we will go and consult. But for a brand, especially a larger brand, to go and make a couple tens of millions of dollar investment in bringing a new product to market, they're not just going to go read 3 product reviews and say, oh, cool, we have enough, we're done. And so the challenge for us was there's a treasure trove of insight about people in these types of sources, often online. How do we access it at the scale that a large enterprise would really need? And 5 or so years ago, when we kind of challenged ourselves to do this, the math had not caught up really to
Yeah.
access that information. Human language is complex and hard, and it was tough to extract from that useful information. And so that was the challenge. And we sat ourselves down to try to tackle that. And from that evolved this capability, which is we call it Atlas. And it is quite good now at extracting really useful information from unstructured data sources, things like product reviews, things like long form social media, increasingly things like imagery and video. Anytime these people are out there saying, I'm this type of person and I like this thing, and here's
Mhm.
why, and taking all of that, but at scale. And so now we're not talking to hundreds or even thousands of people, but millions of people organically from their own mouths. Who are they? What do they want? And it's extremely rich information that we can now convert into that same type of information that these brands have always wanted, but we're doing it at orders of magnitude bigger scale and in timelines that are dramatically shorter because this information's effectively
Right.
sitting out there. We just need to go access it. And that's really changed the game in terms of how our clients are able to access that information. The types of kind of research activities that they had traditionally done haven't gone away, but have morphed pretty considerably.
For a long time, like even customer interviews, like you had mentioned, were standard just because of the potential honesty that could come from that. And you get a really deep view into someone's habits that you can make that signal trail. I love that term, signal trail of how somebody makes those types of decisions, but very expensive, very, very time consuming. So much of our life is online and in other spaces that we can leverage that data. And now with the technology being able to kind of meet us where we're at to pull the correct pieces with guidance from the experts, it just makes it magnitudes more easy. But as you started to put this together and you were able to get a lot more of these insights, was there something surprising that came out of the data that you started to collect where maybe in traditional interviews or in some of the more standard, maybe even if there's a big budget behind it, even those practices, you are seeing some different types of patterns emerge from this new unstructured data?
Yeah, there's a kind of a product answer to that, and then maybe a fun answer. But
Okay.
like from a capability standpoint, I think I continue to be surprised at how chatty people are in a helpful way and like what they're willing to
Yeah.
share. And so the types of insight the sort of unknown unknowns that you can uncover through an approach like this
Mm,
that you wouldn't have thought to ask about in an interview or in a piece of traditional research, I think continues to surprise me. And so just the breadth and depth and quality of what you can get out of these types of approaches, in addition to then the speed and cost
mm.
advantages of them, super impressive and continue to be shocked. And what does that mean for a client who doesn't care to geek out about a capability like I do? Um, Insights and opportunities that they would just never have known about. This is a
Right.
couple years, then I'll speak in sort of, generalities here to protect the innocent, if you will. But the marshmallow category, we were working with a marshmallow manufacturer. And I assumed before working with them that, like, how interesting could marshmallows be? Like, I think we kind of cracked the code on marshmallow technology and, all that they are and do. And yet, one of the things we found pretty quickly was that there was this whole usage occasion, which is an industry term for a collection
Mhm.
of consumer needs that existed that the client we were working with had no idea about. People were actually taking mini bags of mini marshmallows in their cars to use as coffee sweetener because they're
Oh,
portable.
yeah.
They're sweet. If they go stale, it doesn't really matter because I'm dropping them into coffee anyway, and I just need it to dissolve. And it was solving a need for them in ways that, other sweeteners and so forth weren't. Super
Mm.
unexpected, sort of an insight that no one at the brand or frankly on our side either had ever thought to ask about. But it was sitting right there in this information and led to some really interesting product ideas and innovation ideas for that brand. And I've like tons of examples of that kind of stuff where it's just, oh, wouldn't have even thought to ask, but consumers were leaving that trail of signals right to that idea if you could just listen to them.
And the unknown unknown, I think, is a huge piece of innovation that I think, especially as you get to be a larger brand or you become more focused on the main use cases opposed to a very functional and very intelligent way that the consumers kind of innovated in leveraging the product as well. And I can also imagine that data is incredibly useful for people who are making the cream tops for
Sure.
coffee. I've seen them like in Target and whatever. They have a lot of marshmallow flavoring. So clearly that's also a taste indicator that people like that type of sweetener in their coffee as well.
Absolutely.
Lots of different capabilities that could absolutely open up with that kind of information for different even parts of the industry. If they did not want to add that product to their category, somebody else could take a lot of that data
Yeah.
and leverage it in a new and interesting way as well.
There's the cool examples like that, I can share. There are some topics that people feel maybe less comfortable talking about when you're with another
Mm,
human. And that could be in a qualitative sort of a focus group or an interview, or even in a piece of research where some human is going to be interpreting that. And what we have
mhm.
found is that through some of these approaches to access people in their natural environment where they feel comfortable sharing about topics, you can get them to open up about things that you might not get them to otherwise. And so we actually just wrapped up a project in the sexual wellness space. And as you might imagine, there's all sorts of taboos and cultural barriers to talking about sexual wellness in this country, but
Right.
even maybe more so in other countries. And yet people are having these conversations if you can go to where they are and access that information. And we're able to find really rich, new information that would have been quite hard to actually get because some of these things are uncomfortable for people to talk about with another person.
Right. You had mentioned Reddit earlier, but in those types of spaces where it is anonymized and they have that kind of safety to speak about something, but there is enough information or context to understand this is potentially somebody at a certain age in a certain age range or gender identity, whatever that might be. I think what has been so overwhelming probably for a lot of people, whether it's a large brand or somebody who is trying to access this type of information at a smaller scale, it's just the breadth of data. So, as you were kind of building this out, how are the people working alongside this curate that information and pull out the things that you want to find out, but at the same time, allowing again for those kind of unknown unknowns as far as the process is concerned?
It was really important to us. I think curate's such a good word. ZS has always been a very expertise driven company.
Mm,
We have humans who have expertise that they built up over the years, and that's important. It's very easy, particularly with AI these days, to have a lot of black box stuff happening, and the AI
mhm,
spits things out. And where'd that come from? What is this? And we didn't want that. So We really engineered the capability that I was describing from the ground up to take advantage of human expertise along the way. This is a geekier answer than you probably wanted to stop me if I'm getting too geeky.
We're kind of at the intersection. I would say a lot of our audience are founders. They're a lot of creative technologists. So I do think the data piece and understanding the strategic aspect is really, really important for people to hear. That's what we need, because to
I did
understand that
warn
is then
you.
to understand the capabilities.
I will try not to actually get too geeky, but for example, from the very beginning, in terms of what data sources are we even trying to access, we invest a ton of energy identifying the right source,
Right.
within a given source, filtering down to the right population, given the questions that we're trying to answer, cleaning and weighting data to make sure it's as representative as it can be if we feel like there may be
Mhm.
something misrepresentative. It skews in a demographic that we didn't necessarily want to skew in that way or what have you.
Mhm.
So we're not just taking a fire hose of data off the internet and plugging it into a black box. The math itself that we've put together takes that very curated data then and extracts from it and adds structure to it in ways that businesses care about, which we know because it replicates the processes that we've been following for decades. So what are all the consumer needs in this universe? What are all of those usage occasions, the situations in
Mhm.
which they're using products? What are the features and attributes? And so we're shifting from unstructured soup of information to very structured, but also structured in a way that's useful to answer business questions. And then we've layered on decision-making frameworks because the last thing we
Mm.
wanted to do was create a giant word cloud, which
Right.
is often the case when working with data like this, or traditionally had been. We counted a bunch of words out there. Here you go. And that's not super useful. What do I do? If a word is big, does that mean it's good? Does it matter? And so we've added in a lot of steps to say, these are the things that actually matter. This is what actually drives sales or satisfaction or whatever the thing is that a brand cares about. Here are ways to segment people in this universe to identify different personas who act and differently and want different things. Here's how vulnerable different brands are in this space. So actually quantifying the opportunity because the degree of needs that are not being met by the brands that are there. So very actionable information, which we spent an enormous amount of time baking into this process, which required expertise from humans who knew
Mhm.
those are still brands need and want. We may be getting the data in a different way, but we actually still need those pieces at the end of the day to make decisions. We also didn't want to just stop with like, okay, cool, here's a bunch of insights that are maybe better and faster than they were before. You can take all those same insights and now because we know down to the ingredient level like what's working and what's not working, you can rebuild new products very rapidly using the same kind of generative AI infrastructure. So we're able to short circuit that process now too, where it's now not just humans reading a brief to say, cool, this is what people
Mhm.
want, let's get in a room and brainstorm. There's a lot of good things that come out of brainstorming, but also a lot of wasted energy and ideas that are actually maybe not correct or rooted in the underlying insights as they should be. And so if you can put humans in that process, but augment the process with AI that's now powered with that data foundation, you can cheat and build new concepts and products very rapidly that are pre-optimized based off of what consumers are telling us they want.
You're giving such a great example of the entrepreneurship within an expert field, right? So you're taking the kind of traditional consulting world, which has people from all different backgrounds, expertise, education, a lot of field experience, and being able to leverage that maybe taste, nuance, ability to suss out the things already that data backed or also a bit of intuition too are going to be important to a brand or important to a customer, and you were able to kind of layer that into the process. You have a lot of this unstructured data and you have this kind of gate of really smart strategy, and you were saying the ways in which it would query, the way in which it would filter the information. A lot of that I think is a huge opportunity if you have some specific expertise or understanding of the client, the consumer. Focus in on how you can take this really cool data and curate that and you're doing kind of a venture design for yourself, but you're also allowing your clients to do the same. Were there any sort of hurdles as you were trying to develop this out, but also you're in the consulting role, you're kind of taking on like an innovation role, development role?
Yeah, great question. Maybe one or two points of context too, just to help frame the answer. I've been doing this innovation within a reasonably large organization. It's maybe a little atypical in some ways. ZS, for example, is a very entrepreneurial culture and
Mhm.
encourages people to live on an S curve and do new things and take risks and don't become complacent and stagnant. That's a great environment to innovate in. At the same time,
Right.
we're pretty decentralized. And so there's not really anyone who's going to say, well, go do this. Here's the idea, just make this happen. And so it's a bit of a sort of blue sky scenario where like we could do anything. How do we even decide what to innovate on? And it's, while a successful company with resource, financial and otherwise, also a fairly scrappy company. And so it's not like I
Right.
was given a check and go hire 100 people and go nuts. We've had to get very creative in how we've taken existing resources and tools and people and produce what we've produced. So in some ways, it may actually look more akin to a traditional sort of innovation setting, albeit within a large
Right.
company. And so I think a lot of things that have led us to be successful on this journey would superficially look pretty similar, but maybe the context is a little bit different. For example, we've had to be very laser focused on the needs of our end customers for this particular
Mhm.
capability, who tend to be customer insight professionals, brand innovation professionals.
Mhm.
But because we're a services firm, it's a little hard for us to say no to things. If a client says, well, I'd
Right.
like you to do this, and that's not exactly what we were doing, they don't expect us to say, no, that's not really part of our roadmap. And so we're not going to do that. Our roadmap probably zigs and zags a little bit, maybe more than you would maybe hope for in a traditional process. We've had to be quite flexible as the external market has ebbed and flowed and our kind of client needs evolve and so forth, like anyone would. A little bogey where I've got colleagues who are doing things that also directly affect what we're able to do. So if a team decides we're going to change our tech stack, whoops, like that's the stack we were using to build this product. And so there's an additional kind of factor there of flexibility that we're externally, yes, but also internally. Things like funding, like I still have to go and make the case for resources like many
Right.
entrepreneur people would in a sort of different setting, but the KPIs are a little bit different. So
Mhm.
yes, we need customers and we have to prove that there is some ROI here, but that's, I would say, important, but maybe not even as important as my ability to enable my colleagues, other partners at the firm who maybe want to use the capability or produce thought leadership for the firm that demonstrates our expertise and so things that have value but a little less tangible. And so different calculus goes into how much funding to ask for and what is the measure of success and so forth. Contextual differences like that. I think it's been a lot of the same types of things that I have to care about that I think any sort of more traditional entrepreneur would.
You gave really great context on that. I think sometimes there's sort of a binary of just because there's a lot more bureaucratic roadblocks in a corporate setting as far as innovation or integrating the tech stack, or there's other client needs that you have to maybe prioritize at certain times or another that maybe not maybe directly conflict, but maybe can delay certain milestones that you would like to be getting to when you're kind of developing a new venture inside a company. But I do think that, like you said, the culture is so important. So it seems that ZS is really focused on wanting to serve their people the best, serve their employees the best, and also keep that innovative edge so that they can serve people in a different way and a maybe uniquely useful and an interesting way so that, like you were saying, the ROI isn't just for the end client, how much money they're going to make off this new product that we're creating. It's also how are we going to be better? How are our clients going to maybe bring us new opportunities because of this technology?
Mhm.
You were saying you could potentially use it in validating or designing new ventures too. As you started to sort of roll that into the client, the customer relationship, were there any major roadblocks as far as integrating that into more deeply in the process alongside them, or had a lot of that been ironed out kind of in the back end?
I'd like to think we ironed some things out, but no, definitely have had learnings along the way. Two that come to mind. One early on, I think we started this journey with the expectation that the end product would be a tool. And like, doesn't everyone
Mhm.
want to see tools? And we heard pretty quickly that our clients have too many tools and they didn't
Yeah.
want more. And they were like, why don't you use your tool and just give me the answers to my questions? And so we've evolved our business model to being less of a kind of subscribed SaaS thing into more of an
Right.
accelerated service where you're still interacting with humans who give you data driven answers. So that was a big aha in the beginning. And more recently, this is public information because they have shared it, but we do a lot of work with the Hershey company and help them on their new product innovation. And we have the capability to move extremely rapidly in that process. And so a process that
Right.
used to take many months can now be done in days and weeks. And we saw that as an advantage. Look how fast we can do this. And they
Mhm.
actually give us feedback that that's cool. Is then yes, speed is good. However, we have humans on this side of the equation who want to be involved in that process, and there's only so fast that humans can operate. And so we've had to actually find the right balance between moving at the speed that an AI powered tool can enable while bringing the humans along so that we can still make sure that expertise is part of the equation and that the right people who need to participate are part of the process still.
And that's a testament even just, getting it out into the hands is always gonna be a different experience than anything that you can imagine with or without AI. Sometimes you have to get it out into the wild, so to speak, for to get the reactions that that you need so you can better understand how to serve. So that was really helpful in understanding because I was about to follow up with like, are people using it as a tool? Are they wanting it more in the service side? Because it really does make a huge difference in how it's integrated and it can sometimes be surprising because like you said sometimes it's like well of course they want access to all these insights like
Well,
just themselves and
like
then many times it's more so we just want the outcomes of how great this is as opposed to the thing itself, which is I guess often how that happens anyway. It's a testament also to your venture design too because you're getting this feedback from large companies that the speed is so important and yet also there are still these human checkpoints that we have that are part of our process. So what are you seeing? So we're talking about new product development, right? So new product development, maybe new venture development. Is there anything surprising that's come out of the new product development space as far as how quickly that can kind of go to market?
I think the biggest surprise to me, I was speaking for myself, has been that reduction in speed combined with quality of product.
Right.
So there's been a very defined process that a lot of these large companies use to bring new products to market. Lots of stage gates, lots of testing,
Hmm.
but most people in the field would tell you that those are only so effective. A lot of times people will say, "Oh gosh, yeah, I'd buy that thing if you launched it," and they don't. And
Hmm.
there's only so much accuracy some of those traditional approaches can bring. And so by re-engineering the process to actually build the concepts off of the underlying little Lego building blocks that we already know people like, the success rate of these concepts is dramatically higher. And we've
Hmm.
done research on research and compared when you design a product through an approach like this versus a traditional only human led approach, the outcomes are so superior. It's not even really a question anymore for us anyway.
Yeah.
And so that I think has produced better products at the end of the day, which is great for these brands. Bringing a unsuccessful product to market is a failure, not just in an academic sense, but like a real financial failure. It's a lot of money that gets spent on products that aren't successful. And so brands benefit. I guess at the end of the day, I'm also a bit of a narcissist and I like helping make products that I also want to buy. And so
Right.
they're getting better things at the end of the day because they've thankfully told us what they wanted in the first place.
Now it's even more likely that you can get to not even just like a minimum viable product, but like a minimum lovable product very quickly that people can truly enjoy and then interact with more quickly. Or even we just have a lot of this extra data already. So you're able to pare down into the features or the qualities of the product that they really need at this given moment, which is so important. I'm sure a lot of the gates have to do with quality, but what are you seeing as far as kind of that that balance between the efficiency, the speed, the quality is high, so that's good. But what are you seeing maybe as far as the balance with the brand itself? I know sometimes these larger brands, there's the risk management, of course, not wanting to launch something that's gonna fail. Then at the same time, when you're also looping in this kind of faster process, have you seen some pushback or some lags in maybe trusting fully into the entire process just because they maybe have had those checkpoints in the past to protect their brand de-risking in that sort of sense?
Yeah, we have been pretty sensitive to that. I don't think we wanted to show up with the assumption that, well, gosh, just trust us. We oftentimes will suggest take your existing process, all those stage gates, take an
Mhm.
idea that we've helped produce in the process that we've just been talking about, and run it through the same checkpoints and compare. With a number of our clients have gotten to the point where they've done that enough times and they don't need to really do that side by side comparison anymore. They trust the process at this point. But that tends to be
Yeah.
the sort of phase one of working with an organization in this way. Don't take our word for it. Let's let data, and ultimately the consumer guide what they like better. And now we've had the benefit of doing this for long enough that there are real products in market that have been conceptualized and designed through this approach that are performing very well. And so that's always a helpful proof point to say, again, don't trust us. Look at that thing.
Have you noticed, I know that we were talking a lot about product and new ventures, but have you seen brands leverage this particular information in their own maybe adjustments to their branding or their communications?
Absolutely. I was talking about one very specific use case, building new products, but a large
Mhm.
part of the success of a product is also the look and feel of the package, the brand, the experience that's created. And you can
Right.
use these same sources of information for that as well. Again, accelerated via what generative AI can help with the semiotics of a product, the colors, the imagery, the tonality of the messaging. All of these are data points at the end of the day that you can capture and quantify and figure out which ones are working for which types of people in which categories in which demand spaces, and then reconstitute quickly into new concepts and ideas, but also marketing collateral as well as more abstract brand
Mhm.
positionings and forth. And so
Right.
we've definitely been doing that as well. Previous question about adoption and sort of tolerance for doing that. I've noticed more skepticism at that brand level, maybe
Right.
understandably, is the essence of a lot of these companies. They've cultivated this brand for decades, and that is their
Mhm.
secret sauce. They're willing to take risks maybe on a given product, but we're talking about using AI to change the essence of who we are, is a little more caution in those
Right.
conversations. But I think the same approach of, again, don't take our word for it. Let's validate, let's show. Um, how we would modify this and put that back in front of consumers and let them be the guide. And on that, get sort of a tangent, a slight tangent, but I'm sure you've seen stats too about these days, the volume of search activity that's going through AI search engines,
Mhm.
whether that's
Yeah.
embedded in Google or sites like Perplexity or even just like ChatGPT. Um, it's a huge chunk of search these days. And I think that's actually opened the door a little bit to brands realizing like, okay, AI is part of this because I now have to
Mhm.
figure out how to craft brand for consumers and how they perceive me, but also for how these AI engines perceive my brand, because that's where consumers are going and asking about brands now. And if, the AI, if ChatGPT says I am good at these things and not good at those things, that's going to be a huge influencer on whether those people buy my thing or not. And so I've started to see more interest in how do we use those same AI kinds of approaches, not just to build new products, but also the brand level things, the communications and so forth as well.
The AI search optimization too, there's also a level of opinion that it's giving as well as opposed to like a Google search where
Sure.
maybe your ranking is kind of the opinion, even though it just could be traffic, it could be you're paying for it, whatever it might be. Where you're ranked is kind of like that was maybe an indicator of how long you've been around or the quality. While now
Yep.
it's, I guess it would also depend on the models too. And it's probably picking up on a lot of the consumer insights too, which is even more interesting and probably more validating, probably for Atlas too.
Yeah.
because it's picking up what people are saying about the companies.
Sure.
So it's looking at
Yeah.
kind of that larger reputation. How can we probably train and also put things out there that are being picked up by this? But some of the best answers you're going to get about that are probably going to come from the models themselves as well. This particular technology, I think you've probably already been a product partner for a long time with that trust, but has it sort of elevated the positioning in that consulting space?
One of the other reasons why we have invested a lot of energy in building these new techniques, in addition to just being frustrated at how slow and painful the old techniques were,
Mhm.
was as a way to differentiate ourselves. There's a lot of great services partners out there, very smart people who have been doing this work for forever. And for us to just show up and say, hey, we're here now. Why don't you hire us? Why would I? I've already got all these other smart people. And so having a capability like this has really given us a really unique competitive advantage to say,
Yeah.
we're not only smart people, but we can do this work faster and better at the end of the
Mhm.
day. And so it has opened doors that I suspect would not have been open to us without it. I think has really changed the conversation to grow the relationships we have with clients maybe faster than would normally have happened, giving credibility in ways that would have maybe taken years to build previously. We can show up with that credibility immediately. And so it's been a huge advantage for us.
I was hoping to hear more of is just how it is enhanced that value prop for your existing clients, but then also potentially new ones. And like you said, there is a level of trust, and probably I don't know if this is true of all consulting agreements, but a lot of them they try to get their feet wet, and give things that potentially feel a little bit safer in the beginning, and then you can kind of escalate and get to bigger projects, larger roles in their innovation process or whatever that might be. And I can totally see how this would accelerate that, because very quickly you can show them side by side, here's what you're doing now, here's what it could be, and showing them that difference very quickly absolutely opens up a whole new world of value for them. Kind of as a couple wrap up questions, where do you think this it could be about Atlas itself or just AI in this process? We've been talking about a lot of the capabilities it's already unlocking. What do you think is next for this type of technology in, you could say, with ZS and working with a client? Like, what are some things that you see happening in the near future in this particular space, leveraging that type of technology?
Conveniently, I was just at a conference for insights professionals and technology and insights last week. And I go to a lot of these to keep an eye on what's out there, where is the industry going, what new needs do brands have that we might be able to solve. And I was a little surprised that, in every previous conference I've been to for the last at least 2 years, it's been this just fire hose. I think for at least now, there's been a bit of a pause or a lull in like, game changing new thing that no one has ever seen before. And we've entered a bit
Right.
of how do I adopt this in a way that's actually impactful? Brands and end users of these technologies shifting from a sea of pilots to I'm going to choose, make some bets on which of these use cases I
Hmm.
want to use tools for, and then start changing the people and the processes that need to work around them and adapt to them. So it seems like that's the mode, at least for some period of time, we're in at the moment, which maybe is not as sexy and cool on the surface because like who doesn't love flashy new gadgets, but is likely to be a lot more high impact for
Yeah.
brands and teams. And so actually figuring out how to use the things that they've now piloted, probably a little painful as processes are changed and people have to learn to work a little bit differently, but much more useful at the end of the day, which again, I'm a nerd, but that excites me.
I think it's very exciting because sometimes with the fire hose, it's fun because you're getting to see everything start to develop and come together, and where the idea is coming from, what could be implemented, what could not be implemented, and it can be overwhelming. But then when there's this type of period where you're finally getting into the process, and like you were saying, starting to get those insights about how people are actually wanting to use it, how is it actually enhancing the process or driving revenue? Many things sound very good, but they're not actually creating the impact that you all want to deliver, right? Your piece is about impact, so intentionality is always going to be a part of that impact. And the fact that you put a lot of, your expertise and intentionality into the product itself will serve you well in this stage, because that's what they're looking for. So I always ask at the end of the podcast, I called it everyday innovation. I feel like everybody has their own take on what that means to them or in their company, whatever context they want to put in personally. So I wanted to ask you, what does everyday innovation mean to you?
If I reflect on the innovation journey I have been on most recently and those prior, I think there's probably three things that have motivated me. One is a very low tolerance for annoyance. And so I find myself often thinking like, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. This is silly.
Hmm.
A second is enough hubris or maybe, I don't know, maybe self-delusion to think, well, I can solve that thing, even when maybe other people have tried and haven't been successful. And the third is a really, I guess, painful self-awareness of my own flaws. And so surrounding myself by people who compliment me. Again, I mentioned before on this journey, there have been just tons of colleagues who have been very passionate and smart and brilliant and have added so much to this equation. On a personal level, my family has been very forgiving of the time and energy it's taken. And so I guess that would be what I would impart here is be annoyed, believe in yourself to be able to fix problems and surround yourself by great people.
I love that you drew on a lot of the people as well, because we talk a lot about tech on here too, but having those key people in your life and also being on that self-awareness journey of how can I contribute and how can I uniquely put my perspective into what we're creating is really how the best things happen and the most impact is created. So thank you so much. I want to ask you, are there places to connect with you or to connect with ZS that I can share with everyone, that as far as if they want to take some next steps, or they do you have anything that you'd like to share from like the personal side?
Sure. As you can tell, I'm always happy to geek out about these topics, the kind of intersection of AI and insight,
Yeah.
how consumer brands can bring better things to market. So ZS.com is a good resource for some of this information. ZSAtlasintelligence.com is another a good resource.
Nice.
I'll selfishly plug my own product. A lot of good case studies and maybe thought starters on how tools like this can be used.
I will definitely put those in the show notes and also in the newsletter as well so they can access that easily. But I appreciate your time today. I think there's a lot of inspiring pieces that people can take on how they can leverage this technology and also put themselves and their expertise into the process to create new things and the things they want to see in the world, as you so eloquently put it, seeing the things that they love manifest. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Thanks for having me.